So Meron, you're from Eritrea. Most people don't know very much at all about Eritrea. Eritrea is a country that we hear a lot about. We read that it's considered the North Korea of Africa. And people who are experts in the field, they certainly know quite a bit. But what specifically for you, what is your first memory of life in the dictatorship of Eritrea?
Actually, my first memory is when I was 5, there was no Eritrea. It was occupied by Ethiopia. So my first memory hearing the word Eritrea, knowing that I'm Eritrean, was when our parents, my mom, our neighbors, everybody is around 5, 6 o'clock. They would ask all the children to be outside and watch and let them know in case somebody was coming to the house. So we all, the kids, we were wondering, what are our parents doing in that 5 to 6? Then we realized they were listening to the freedom fighters, the radio that was being broadcasted by the freedom fighters. That's my first memory.
So your country was under occupation by another power, so you were essentially living under a tyranny.
Exactly.
And your first memory is your parents listening to illegal information.
Exactly.
And from that memory, when and why did you leave Eritrea?
My dad fled to Sweden already because my dad was a political activist, one of those undercover activists. And when he found out he was about to be arrested, so he had to flee to Sudan, and from there he made it to Sweden.
Okay.
So when things were getting intense at an early teen, it was decided that we have to join my father in Sweden, so which was 30 years ago.
So how old were you when you decided?
I was 12, almost 13.
13 years old. And he was in Sweden?
Yes.
Your mother was still in Eritrea?
Yes.
You left, but how did you do this? How did this take place?
No, I was one of the privileged ones, the lucky ones. So I just flew with Ethiopian Airlines straight to Sweden because through my dad I had become Swedish citizen.
I see.
So for me, I was one of the privileged ones that did not have to go through the hardship that my people are facing these days.
What is the population of Eritrea?
Just found out last week, it's 3.6 million.
3.6 million?
3.6.
Okay. And in terms of comparison, the history of Eritrea, the occupation, it ended when?
It ended 1991.
1991?
Yes.
Now, this man tell us a little bit about this man.
This was
the
at
hero.
that time, he was my hero. Like, we idolized him. Everything he said was, I don't know, like I remember my first memory of him is in Sweden, my dad waking me up at 6 in the morning to go out and collect money to support the movement in Eritrea, he was leading it.
He was the leader of the independence movement.
Exactly.
And what was his name?
Isaias Afwerki.
Isaias Afwerki. Your understanding of him as a hero, that changed?
Of course. Years later. For me, actually, it took me until 2002.
2002?
Yeah.
So in 1991, he succeeds with the independence movement.
Exactly.
And by 2002, he is still in power.
Yes.
Okay. What was your first sense of when things were going badly?
It was actually early, just a few months after independence. When we were fighting for independence, this guy was saying all the time, we're fighting for democracy, for peaceful Eritrea, no more migration. Just a few months after independence, he then said, we don't need multi-party system. And we were just preparing for the referendum to be accepted as a nation by United Nations in 1993. So 92, they had to register everybody to vote. So what happened was the Jehovah's Witnesses refused to vote because it's against their religion.
The Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
Okay. So
And,
they wanted to abstain.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they got arrested. We're talking about thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Uh-huh.
Till this day, nobody knows if they are alive or not. They just disappeared.
They disappeared.
Yeah. So this was an early sign. So there was early signs, when going after the disabled war veterans who asked, for some kind of reform, like to get paid to survive, because others, at least they could go back and work. But these people have lost everything for Eritrea.
So the war veterans from the independence movement.
Yes.
The war veterans were
protesting peacefully.
Protesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then what the president ordered was just shoot at them. So they were assassinated in the middle of the street, and nobody reacted. So these signs, they were a sign already from 92 up until 98.
So this hero is still in power.
Still in power.
And now no longer a hero.
Nope. He's actually worse than the previous dictatorship we had.
And the spiral that you say began with persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses and continued persecution of the war veterans. Can you describe a little bit about that spiral?
Well, after the war veterans, he went after the Muslims, accusing them of being jihadists, whoever was criticizing, anybody that have different opinion was being accused for a spy, a traitor, Ethiopian agent, CIA-backed agents. So what happened is, by 96, the constitution was drafted, accepted by the people, by the parliament. By 97, everybody was expecting this to be implemented. So what he does is he starts a war with Ethiopia, which claimed over 20,000 lives in our side, and the same in Ethiopian side as well. And so every time the people went asking about reform, to hold elections, constitution, so the war became an excuse to oppress the people. So every question that you ask, they will tell you, but we're still at war against Ethiopia. And the conscript, 1994, they introduced the proclamation of national service.
Military service.
Military service.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be a year and a half. So the first round went to do their military service in 1994. Until this day, they are still serving.
So how long military service is from the age of?
15, 16, until you are 50, 50.
Until you're 50.
Yeah. So basically, you are a slave of.
So this means you enter the military at 15, and you stay in the military serving the government until 50.
Exactly.
And this is mandatory.
It's mandatory for everybody.
For everyone.
For everybody.
This means that he controls what they eat, when they eat, where they sleep, everything.
Exactly. I mean, like, you get arrested for even thinking to flee. Like, they can read thoughts.
You're describing a situation that is essentially, it's almost impossible to believe it.
Exactly.
This man is in power now. When was this spiral? When did the spiral end? When did it touch bottom in terms of understanding that this dictator is not going to go away?
Year 2000, when 15 ministers, and including the vice president, wrote an open letter asking him to step down, to give the power to the people.
His own ministers wrote him a letter,
exactly.
An open letter.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so the newspapers at that time, we had independent media. So everybody was writing about this open letter. It didn't disappear as he wanted it. So what happened is 2001, just 1 week after September 11.
You mean September 11th in New York?
In the United States,
okay.
Yeah. So the world was busy discussing about the terrorist attack in New York. And so he used that momentum to arrest all his critics. So on September 18, 6 in the morning, it was declared on the state radio, starting today, no more free media. So that same day, the vice president, his wife, all the ministers that we called as G15, and 16 journalists were arrested. Until this day, nobody knows.
So in one day, he arrests all of the people of his own government, declares there will be no more free media, and that's it.
That's it. That's when Eritrea became officially.
So it's been 17 years of this.
Yeah.
I pulled a TV interview that Afwerki did with Al Jazeera, and I think for the benefit of the audience, I think we want to hear what he has to say about some of this, about dictatorship versus democracy.
Okay, now let's look at the domestic political situation in Eritrea. When are elections going to be held in Eritrea? There were elections scheduled for 2001. They didn't take place. When is that going to happen?
What elections?
Elections in Eritrea.
We'll see what the elections in the United States will bring about, and we will wait for about 3-4 decades until we see genuine natural situations emerge in Eritrea.
You're saying Eritrea is going to wait 3 or 4 decades before it holds elections?
Maybe more, who knows?
But isn't
that,
it...
of course, depending on what you call elections, what you believe in elections, what you think in terms of elections.
You know, it's on the one hand, it seems almost a parody, but it isn't at all a parody. It is so profoundly tragic that 3.5, almost 4 million people are living under this man's rule, a man who can disappear a population of Jehovah's Witnesses, disappear veterans, disappear the people who disagree with him, hold them so tight that they risk their lives to flee, and keeps them as his servants by making them all members of the military and keeping them in the military from 15 to 50. Someone is paying for this apparatus. This apparatus, this machinery of dictatorship is being paid by something. How does this happen? Who's paying for this? Where does the money come from?
It's mining.
Mining.
Actually, one of the source of income that this government have is mining, and there are many mining companies.
What do they mine?
Gold, potash. There is over 21 different minerals. So everybody's investing right now.
These are companies from Eritrea or from abroad?
No, from abroad. Actually, we have Canadian Nefson, among those South African, Anglo, Ashanti, South African.
So these are the companies
yes.
that are doing this.
Exactly. And Chalice is Australian, Donia is Chinese. There are many others that.
So you have Chalice is Australian. Donia is Chinese. Anglo Gold Ashanti.
South African.
That's a South African company.
Exactly.
That is essentially financing the dictatorship in your country.
Okay.
And Nefson
Resources
which is
Canadian.
a Canadian company.
Yeah.
So essentially these, of which 3 of them are countries, are companies working out of democracies that are supposed to be held to a higher standard, are actually participating in this. Of course, one would naturally expect the Chinese dictatorship to not mind. In fact, it makes it easier for them to do the sorts of things that they get away with in Africa. But what would you like to say to these companies? What do you have to say to Nefson and here in South Africa to Anglo Gold Ashanti?
Why would you want to become an accomplice to one of the country's its greatest human rights violators? I mean, why would you want to contribute to our suffering?
Well, perhaps some of the members in the media here today can put that question directly, or perhaps someone can start hashtagging or tweeting at these companies, and specifically at the South African company. And of course, remember to tweet it with OFFinJOBURG so we all can get a chance to see it. There are 50,000 political prisoners in your country. 50,000. What do you do in terms of, what is your work like? I think it's important that people get a sense of exactly who you are.
My work is I do different things actually. So I have doing the radio, broadcasting into Eritrea, as I said, since there hasn't been any free media since 2001. Mm-hmm. So the people of Eritrea have been deprived of information So I could give you an example of the Arab Spring, when the Arab Spring was happening. So if you are a person living in Eritrea and does not have access to the outside media, then the Arab Spring never happened because it was never reported. Gaddafi is still in power, Mubarak is still in power. I mean, if they don't report it, how are you supposed to know what's going on outside of Eritrea? So the state TV is always a propaganda. I was actually watching the day Mubarak stepped down. The state TV was reporting about an elephant that gave birth somewhere in Africa. That was like the headline.
So state propaganda takes full control.
Exactly.
Now, most people are unaware of your reputation. You are known for rescuing thousands and thousands of people. Tell us a little bit about that.
So my work in the radio led to that people found out about me and somehow got a hold of my number and start calling me when
This is just randomly once?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So I would receive phone calls, sometimes up to 300 phone calls, even much more. So during the summertime, it's like when the season for migration, everybody's fleeing from Libya to Italy. So I could get 7 phone calls, SAOs phone calls, like from people inside the boat as they are being drowned, as they are drowning. So and then they would tell you, our life depends on you, which is very stressful because you don't want that kind of responsibility. So I'll have to call to the Italian Coast Guard and make sure that these people are being rescued because I have that responsibility. Then you have other refugees that are kidnapped or sold as slaves. Sometimes I get to listen as they are being gang raped. These are people being held hostage for ransom. So it's mainly suffering after suffering. I've heard all kinds of worse stories.
It's mortifying to hear what you have had to deal with, not just in your upbringing and in exile, but having to be the connector with some of those people who no doubt died after calling you or communicating with you. What can we do? What can the people here do? What can be done?
I'm sure like everybody have some kind of expertise. Mm-hmm. So, experience, you could share with us from your experience. If you are an IT expert, we need that badly. Support our cause. There are many organizations working for refugee issues, activists based in South Africa. Actually, we have a strong organization here in Joburg.
So you need everything.
Yeah.
To both get information into Eritrea, get information out of Eritrea, help the people that are escaping Eritrea, bring the leader of Eritrea to justice. Exactly. All of these things.
Yeah.
Meron, I'm so grateful that you're here with us. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.